What does it truly mean to be invisible in your own family? Imagine this every year: the lights shine, the music swells, the guests arrive in glittering gowns, but it's never for you. For 10 long years, Kendall Matthews watched her sister Bianca live like a princess, adored, celebrated, crowned with attention, while Kendall herself stood in the shadows, clutching lists, making calls, carrying the weight of details no one else cared to handle. She was the planner, the fixer, the one everyone depended on, yet the one no one remembered. 10 birthdays for Bianca, each one more extravagant than the last: ballrooms, champagne fountains, DJs, flown in from other cities, endless luxury. And for Kendall, a grocery store cake, a forgotten text message at 9 p.m., a father tossing her a $20 bill as if that was enough to replace love. For years, Kendall swallowed her pain. She told herself maybe next year will be different, but next year never came. The journal entries she kept were heartbreaking reminders: forgot again. At least Rachel brought cupcakes. Maybe I don't matter. But here's where the story twists. Because on her 26th birthday, Kendall finally whispered a word she had never dared to say before: no to being overlooked. No to sacrificing herself. No to being invisible. For the first time, she made a plan, not for Bianca, not for her parents, but for herself. What followed was not just a birthday. It was a rebellion. A silent storm that shook her family to its core. This is not just the story of a forgotten birthday, it's the story of a woman who decided she would never disappear again. At the dinner table, the room was buzzing with excitement. Golden envelopes passed around like treasures, voices filled with pride and laughter. But Kendall Matthews, she sat in silence. Her fingers tightened around the glass of water in front of her, so hard the ice inside clinked like tiny bells, betraying her trembling grip. Everyone's eyes sparkled at Bianca's glamorous plans, yet no one noticed Kendall's quiet struggle. She forced a smile, nodding at the right moments, but deep inside her chest tightened. 10 years of this ritual, the laughter, the planning, the endless spotlight on Bianca and Kendall, always the shadow in the corner holding onto a glass of water like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Pride filled the room like heavy perfume. Kendall's father leaned back in his chair, chest puffed with satisfaction as he boasted about securing the grand ballroom. Her mother, eyes glowing, couldn't stop admiring the golden invitations, praising Bianca as if she were royalty. And Bianca herself, she sat there basking in the praise, flipping her perfect hair, smiling like the world revolved around her. But when the spotlight dimmed for just a moment, all eyes turned to Kendall. Not with admiration, not with gratitude, but with expectation. A thick folder slid across the table, and on top of it, a platinum credit card. "You'll handle the details again, dear. You're so good at it." The words carried the tone of honor, but the weight felt more like chains. For Bianca, celebration meant applause and luxury. For Kendall, it meant sleepless nights, endless phone calls, and a silent role no one would ever applaud. Bianca was the princess of the Matthews family, and Kendall once again was assigned the role of the servant. Pride filled the room like heavy perfume. Kendall's father leaned back in his chair, chest puffed with satisfaction, as he boasted about securing the grand ballroom. Her mother, eyes glowing, couldn't stop admiring the golden invitations, praising Bianca as if she were royalty. And Bianca herself? She sat there basking in the praise, flipping her perfect hair, smiling like the world revolved around her. But when the spotlight dimmed for just a moment, all eyes turned to Kendall. Not with admiration, not with gratitude, but with expectation. A thick folder slid across the table, and on top of it, a platinum credit card. "You'll handle the details again, dear. You're so good at it." The words carried the tone of honor, but the weight felt more like chains. For Bianca, celebration meant applause and luxury. For Kendall, it meant sleepless nights, endless phone calls, and a silent role no one would ever applaud. Bianca was the princess of the Matthews family, and Kendall once again was assigned the role of the servant. In every story there's a star, and then there's the shadow no one sees. Bianca was the shining spotlight of the Matthews family, her life staged like a never-ending performance. Every glance, every laugh, every toss of her hair felt rehearsed, designed to keep the world's attention fixed on her. She was the glitter, the sparkle, the flawless centerpiece. And then there was Kendall, the backstage hand, the one who pulled the strings but was never seen on stage. While Bianca twirled under the chandeliers in golden gowns, Kendall stood behind the curtains holding the clipboard, checking the schedules, forgotten in the darkness. The contrast was cruel. Bianca glowed, adored, celebrated. Kendall dimmed, ignored, erased. Bianca was the princess in the spotlight. Kendall was the shadow that made the spotlight possible, but was never allowed to step into it. 17 years old, that age when most girls dream of freedom, laughter, and late-night sleepovers with friends. Kendall had planned one for weeks, pizza movies, secrets whispered in the dark. It was supposed to be her night, but that night never came. The phone rang and her mother's voice cut through the line. Kendall, Bianca's invitations aren't ready. We need you to cancel your plans. People are counting on you. The words weren't a request, they were a command. So instead of giggling with friends in her bedroom, Kendall sat alone at the dining table, hand cramping, as she addressed envelope after envelope, writing names that weren't hers, preparing for a party she wouldn't even enjoy. Outside, she could hear the faint sound of her friends laughing on speakerphone, asking why she wasn't there. She mumbled excuses, but the truth weighed heavy in her chest. 17 years old, and she had already learned Bianca's joy mattered more than her own. Kendall's childhood was being traded away piece by piece in the name of someone else's celebration. She was 21, the age when most young women finally step into adulthood ready to celebrate themselves, to feel alive, to be seen. Kendall had made dinner reservations weeks in advance, her first real attempt at a birthday that was just for her. A quiet evening with two close friends, laughter, candles, maybe even a toast to the woman she was becoming. But the universe, or rather her family, had other plans. That afternoon, her phone lit up with frantic calls. Bianca's DJ had just canceled. A 30-minute meltdown from her sister turned into a desperate plea from her mother. Kendall, please, you have to fix this. You're the only one who knows how. So Kendall's dinner never happened. While her friends sat at the restaurant waiting, Kendall was in the back seat of a cab, scrolling frantically through her contacts, begging strangers to find a last-minute replacement. Instead of blowing out candles, she was negotiating contracts. Instead of clinking glasses, she was clenching her fists, fighting back tears. By the time Bianca's party was saved, Kendall's birthday had slipped away unnoticed. 21 years on this earth, and still no one had sung her a song. By the time Kendall turned 24, she had already learned to swallow disappointment like it was part of her daily routine. But that year, the pain came with a price tag. Bianca's 25th birthday was supposed to be unforgettable. Her mother wanted roses, thousands of them. Her father insisted it had to look like something out of a magazine. And when the florist bill finally arrived, it was staggering $4,000. Her father had smiled casually, sliding the invoice toward her. Just cover it for now, Kendall. I'll pay you back next week, promise. His tone was so light, as if $4,000 meant nothing. But to Kendall, it was nearly her entire savings money. She had worked for late nights at her job, skipping lunches, saying no to little joys, just to keep her account alive. Still, she pulled out her card. She paid the bill. And as the roses filled the ballroom, Bianca twirled among them like a queen showered in admiration, while Kendall stood in the back, the invisible financier. Next week came, then the week after. Months passed. No reimbursement, no acknowledgement, not even a thank you. Just silence, as if Kendall's sacrifice had dissolved into the air. At 24, she realized something brutal in her family's eyes. Her hard-earned money wasn't hers at all. It was just another resource to be drained for Bianca's glory. Late at night, when the noise of Bianca's laughter had faded and the glitter of her parties was nothing but a memory, Kendall would sit alone with her journal. The pages became her only witness, the silent friend who listened when no one else would. Her handwriting trembled as she wrote down the truth she couldn't say out loud. April 18, 2015, my 16th birthday. Mom said we'd celebrate next week after Bianca's volleyball tournament. Next week never came. April 18, 2016. No one remembered. Dad gave me $20 when I mentioned it at dinner. That was it. April 18, 2017, Rachel brought cupcakes to school. At least someone remembered. Each entry cut deeper than the last. Words that should have held joy, candles, and laughter instead bled with loneliness and silence. To anyone else, it might have looked like ink on paper. But to Kendall, every line was a scar. Every forgotten birthday was another wound. And every page whispered the same cruel refrain. Your life doesn't matter to them. The journal wasn't just a diary. It was evidence, a record of invisibility, a reminder that year after year her existence was overshadowed, erased, forgotten. 30 years old, Bianca's big milestone. To her parents, it was not just a birthday, It was a royal coronation. The Matthews family had already decided the grandest ballroom, the most extravagant theme, the kind of spectacle that would make the neighbors whisper in envy. And once again, all eyes turned to Kendall. Her mother slid the familiar folder across the table nails, clicking against the glossy cover. On top of it sat a platinum credit card shining under the chandelier light like a mockery. "You'll take care of everything again, darling. You're so good at details." Her father chuckled, adding, "Put down the deposits, Kendall. We'll reimburse you later, of course." His laugh carried the same empty promise Kendall had heard for years. For a moment, Kendall just stared at the folder. Inside were pages of magazine clippings, Pinterest printouts, and the same demands she had carried since she was 16. Champagne fountains, imported flowers, a guest list that grew longer by the hour. It wasn't a request, it was an expectation. The unspoken rule of her family: Bianca shines, Kendall serves. And as Kendall's fingers trembled over the folder, a voice inside her whispered something new, something dangerous. Not this time. The glass in Kendall's hand rattled softly, ice cubes clinking against the rim. Her grip was so tight it felt as though the glass might shatter at any second. Around her, the room was alive with chatter, her mother discussing table linens, her father bragging about Bianca's guest list. Bianca scrolling through her phone as if the world belonged to her. But inside Kendall's chest, it was different. It was a storm. Every forgotten birthday, every canceled plan, every dollar drained from her savings. Every time she swallowed the words, "What about me?" only to let them rot in silence. Her knuckles whitened around the glass. The conversations around her blurred into background noise like static. She could feel her heart pounding, her throat tightening, as if the air itself had turned heavy. 10 years of silence pressing down on her in that single moment, and for the first time, Kendall realized she couldn't hold it all in much longer. If she didn't let go soon, something, whether it was the glass in her hand or the fragile facade she'd built, was going to break. That night, long after the dinner ended, Kendall sat alone in her tiny apartment. The familiar folder for Bianca's birthday lay spread open across her kitchen counter, filled with clippings, contracts, and demands that were never hers. She stared at it, her chest heavy, her fingers trembling. And then something shifted. She closed the folder, slowly, deliberately. For the first time in her life, she refused to let it consume her. Her laptop screen glowed as she opened a new tab, not for vendors, not for caterers, not for DJs. This time, she typed Florida beach rentals. Her heart raced as images of oceanfront houses filled the screen. Blue skies, white sand, wide decks where the sunrise could be hers alone. She clicked again, flight tickets to Destin. Another click, swimming with dolphins experience. With every search, every screenshot, it felt like a door inside her had finally swung open. On her desktop, she created a new folder. The title was simple, but it felt revolutionary. My birthday. She sat back in her chair, staring at those two words. They looked almost foreign, like they belonged to someone else. But for the first time, they were hers. It wasn't just a folder. It was a declaration. Kendall Matthews was finally planning something for herself. The cursor still blinked on Kendall's laptop screen when her phone buzzed. It was Rachel, her best friend, her anchor. Within an hour, Rachel was sitting cross-legged on Kendall's living room floor, a glass of wine in her hand, scanning the Florida rental confirmation glowing on the screen. Rachel's eyes widened, then softened with a smile. "You really did it. You finally booked it." Kendall nodded nervously, almost like a child caught in rebellion. "I don't know if I'm crazy, Rachel. What if they find out? What if everything falls apart?" Rachel leaned closer, her voice steady, warm, but sharp with truth. "Kendall, everything has already been falling apart. For years, you've been disappearing for them. You've been giving your life away piece by piece. And what did you get in return? Nothing. This," she pointed at the screen. "This is the first time you're choosing yourself. And it's about damn time." Kendall swallowed hard, tears threatening to spill. For years, she had been told she was selfish if she even thought about her own happiness. But here was Rachel, her friend, her sister, in spirit, telling her the opposite, that choosing herself wasn't selfish. It was survival. For the first time, Kendall felt a flicker of something she hadn't recognized in years. Hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, her life could finally belong to her. If her family thought Kendall was still their reliable planner, then that was exactly what she would let them believe. By day, she crafted an illusion. Kendall sent emails to vendors with polished signatures confirming bookings that didn't exist. She mocked up fake contracts with convincing letterheads and neat payment schedules. She even created spreadsheets of deposits detailed enough that no one would dare question her. When her mother called to check in, Kendall's voice was calm professional. Yes, the caterer is confirmed. Yes, the decorator sent samples. Yes, the DJ is locked in. Each lie slid out as smoothly as truth because after 10 years of doing it for real, Kendall knew exactly how it was supposed to sound. By night, she returned to her true folder. My birthday. Screenshots of beachfront houses, confirmations for flights, the dolphin excursion that landed exactly on her 26th birthday. It was a double life, a balancing act between the facade her family saw and the secret freedom she was building. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, Kendall had orchestrated perfection for Bianca. Now she was orchestrating something far greater, her own escape. And for once, the plan wasn't for Bianca to shine. It was for Kendall to finally breathe. Kendall wasn't alone in her rebellion. Slowly, quietly, her closest friends became her allies. Rachel was the first. She had always been Kendall's voice of reason, the one who saw through the family's manipulation long before Kendall could admit it to herself. When Kendall told her about the Florida plan, Rachel didn't hesitate. Finally, you're not running away, Kendall. You're choosing yourself, and I'll be right there with you. Then came Michael, her coworker from accounting. He overheard Rachel talking about the trip and showed up at Kendall's cubicle with a grin. You're really doing this, huh? About time. I've got airline miles expiring, first-class upgrade for the birthday girl. Don't argue, it's already done. For a man who usually joked about spreadsheets, his loyalty left Kendall stunned, tears pricking her eyes. And Lisa, her old college roommate, the one who remembered every small detail Kendall once dismissed about herself. Lisa booked her ticket without a second thought. We missed too many of your birthdays, Kenny. Not this one. This year, we celebrate you. One by one, they gathered around her, weaving a net of support stronger than anything Kendall had known from her own family. They weren't just friends anymore. They were co-conspirators. They were proof that family isn't only blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose you. For the first time in her life, Kendall felt like she had a team. Not to plan another party for Bianca, but to pull off the greatest plan of all, her freedom. The rebellion didn't begin with fireworks. It began with the smallest of choices, but for Kendall, they felt monumental. When her phone buzzed with another demand from Bianca, fine gold-dipped orchids for the tables. Kendall didn't reply instantly like she always had. She let the message sit there for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of silence that would have been unthinkable a year ago. And with every passing second, she felt a strange, delicious power humming in her chest. Then came the phone calls, her mother's name flashing across the screen, ringing again and again. Normally, Kendall would answer on the first ring, pen in hand, ready to take orders. But this time, she hit ignore. The sound of silence that followed wasn't guilt. It was freedom. Each ignored text, each delayed response, each moment she chose not to jump at their command became its own quiet victory. They were small rebellions invisible to the world, but inside Kendall, they were earthquakes. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving her family's demands. She was resisting them. And with every tiny act of defiance, Kendall was learning what it meant to breathe on her own terms. It was past midnight when Kendall finally clicked the button. Book now. Her laptop screen flashed, and there it was, a glowing confirmation email. Blue Bungalow, Destin, Florida. Oceanfront. 2 weeks, paid in full. Kendall stared at the words as if they were written in another language. For so long, her emails had been filled with vendor quotes, receipts, and contracts for parties that were never hers. And now, for the very first time, her name sat proudly on a reservation that belonged to no one else but her. Her hand covered her mouth, but it couldn't hide the smile breaking across her face. It wasn't polite, it wasn't forced, it was raw, genuine, almost unfamiliar. For years, she had smiled only for show, for others' approval. But this was hers. A laugh slipped out, quiet at first, then louder, until tears blurred her vision. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the confirmation glowing on the screen, and whispered to herself, "It's real. It's finally real." For the first time in her life, Kendall Matthews smiled, not because she had to, but because she was free. The evening of Bianca's grand birthday finally arrived. The Matthews family pulled up to the prestigious Westlake Country Club. Bianca shimmering in her custom-made gold gown, her parents buzzing with pride. They expected splendor, They expected perfection. They expected the kind of party that would be remembered for years. But when the heavy ballroom doors swung open, silence swallowed the room. No twinkling fairy lights, no cascading roses, no champagne fountain waiting to sparkle. Just rows of bare tables, chairs stacked against the wall, the floor echoing under their footsteps. The vast ballroom, meant to be the stage for Bianca's glittering triumph, looked like a hollow shell. Bianca froze in the doorway, her smile collapsing as her eyes darted around in disbelief. Where is everything?" Her voice cracked, shattering the silence. Her mother's face drained of color. Her father's jaw clenched. A server passed by, confused, and when asked, shrugged. "No event scheduled tonight," he said matter-of-factly. The horror in Bianca's eyes was louder than any scream. The Matthews perfect illusion, carefully crafted year after year, had just fallen apart, and this time there was no Kendall in the shadows to save it. At first it was just confusion. Guests in shimmering gowns and crisp tuxedos stepped through the doors, their heels clicking against the marble floor, only to be met with an empty hall. They looked around, clutching their invitations, whispering to each other. "Are we early?" one woman asked, tugging nervously at her sequin dress. Another man checked his watch, then his phone, as if time itself was playing tricks on him. Within minutes, the whispers spread like wildfire. "There's nothing here. Was the event canceled? Did we get the wrong date?" The glamour of expectation quickly curdled into irritation. Small clusters of guests gathered near the doors, their voices rising. Some made awkward jokes. Others sighed loudly, fanning themselves with the golden invitations that now felt like a mockery. By the half hour mark, people began drifting back toward the parking lot. Babysitters were waiting at home. Early flights loomed in the morning. One by one, luxury cars pulled away, leaving behind a trail of headlights and murmurs of disappointment. And all the while, Bianca stood frozen at the center of the chaos, mascara beginning to smudge as her perfect night unraveled before her very eyes. The clock struck 7, and the grand entrance everyone had been waiting for finally came. The double doors at the end of the ballroom opened with dramatic flair, and Bianca swept in like a queen. Her golden gown shimmered under the harsh fluorescent lights, every bead catching the glare as if it were sunlight. She held her chin high, her lips curved in that perfect smile she had practiced for the cameras. In her mind, she imagined gasps of admiration, a wave of applause, the spotlight squarely on her. But instead, silence. The moment her heels clicked against the empty floor, Bianca's smile faltered. Her eyes darted across the barren hall. No flowers, no music, no decorations, nothing but guests whispering in confusion and disappointment. Her perfect posture crumbled. Where is everything?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The echo of her words bounced mockingly off the naked walls. Gasps replaced applause. Awkward glances replaced admiration. The golden princess had arrived, but her kingdom was nothing but air. And in that instant, Bianca's carefully built image, flawless, adored, untouchable, cracked wide open for everyone to see. While chaos swallowed the Matthews family back at the country club, Kendall was thousands of miles away, her toes buried in the warm, white sands of Florida. The sun draped her shoulders in gold. The ocean breeze brushed against her face, and the sound of waves replaced the shrill voices that had haunted her for years. She leaned back in a beach chair, sunglasses shielding her eyes, a mimosa in hand. For the first time in her life, there was no phone buzzing with demands, no frantic lists waiting to be checked off. Back at the ballroom, Bianca's voice cracked as she screamed into her phone, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her mother scrambling in panic, her father bargaining with staff who could do nothing. The grand illusion of their control had collapsed. But Kendall, she laughed, a soft, genuine laugh carried away by the sea breeze. She didn't need to see their panic to feel satisfied. For once, their chaos wasn't hers to fix. And for the audience watching her story, the contrast was undeniable. Bianca's golden world was crumbling, while Kendall, the forgotten daughter, was finally shining in her own quiet sunlight. The moment Kendall unlocked her apartment door, she knew something was wrong. The lights were already on, the air felt heavy, and there, sitting on her couch, pacing by the window, arms crossed in her favorite chair, was her family. Her mother, stiff-backed eyes blazing, her father, jaw-tight fists shoved into his pockets. Bianca, still in designer clothes, mascara smeared like battle paint. Kendall froze, suitcase in hand, as her mother's voice cut through the room like a knife. "How could you be so selfish? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her father's voice boomed next. You humiliated this family. Everyone is talking. You destroyed your sister's most important night. And Bianca, always dramatic, clutched her chest like a wounded queen. You've always been jealous of me. Admit it. You ruined everything because you couldn't stand to see me happy. The apartment walls seemed to close in their voices, bouncing, accusing, demanding. They expected Kendall to crumble like always, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But this time, something in her was different. The Kendall who once trembled behind a glass of water was gone. The Kendall who planned, who paid, who stayed silent, she had left her behind in Florida sunlight. And as her family's voices rose in fury, Kendall slowly set her suitcase down and straightened her back. She was no longer the invisible daughter. She was ready to speak. The living room became a courtroom, and Kendall was the accused. Her mother's voice cracked like a whip. You humiliated us, Kendall. Do you know how embarrassing it was? Everyone was there, everyone saw. Do you even care about this family's reputation? Her father's tone was harsher, colder. You've always been ungrateful. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. By sabotaging your sister's most important night, Bianca's accusations cut the deepest. She stood, eyes blazing, her hands trembling with rage. You ruined my life, Kendall. You've always been jealous of me, and now the whole world knows it. Do you know what they're calling me online? A joke, a disaster, and it's all because of you. Each word hurled at Kendall like stones. Selfish, bitter, ungrateful, saboteur. They didn't see her pain. They didn't acknowledge her years of sacrifice. To them, Kendall wasn't a daughter, wasn't a sister. She was the scapegoat, the villain in their perfect family drama. The room felt smaller with every accusation, their voices overlapping, rising higher and higher until Kendall could barely breathe. But deep down, something in her chest was no longer breaking. It was hardening. Their words, once daggers, now clanged uselessly against the armor she had begun to forge. The shouting, the accusations, the venom in their voices, it all swirled around Kendall like a storm. For a moment, she closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 26 years pressing down on her. But when she opened them again, something had changed. Her shoulders straightened. Her grip on the suitcase loosened. She was no longer shrinking into herself. She was rising. Her voice cut through the chaos, steady, sharp, unshakable, 26 years. And not once have I ever had a real birthday. The room fell silent. Her mother's lips parted. Her father blinked. Bianca froze mid-breath. Kendall stepped forward, her voice gathering strength with every word. Since I was 16, I've canceled my own plans, given up my money, and erased myself so Bianca could shine. I have spent over 10 years planning parties for her, down to every last flower and glass of champagne, and me. My birthday has been forgotten, ignored, dismissed. Every single year. Her words landed like thunder, impossible to ignore. She wasn't begging. She wasn't apologizing. She was stating the truth they had buried, the truth they never wanted to hear. And for the first time, it was not Kendall who trembled. It was them. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Kendall let it hang in the air, then took one deliberate step forward. Her eyes locked on her mother's purse. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of every wound she had ever endured. Give me back my apartment key. Her mother blinked, stunned. What? Kendall didn't flinch. You heard me. My home is mine. From this moment on, you don't come in without my permission. Her father scoffed, trying to recover control. Don't be ridiculous. Were your parents? But Kendall's voice cut him off sharp as glass. Parents respect their children. Parents don't drain them dry, don't erase their birthdays, don't use them as servants. So here's the truth. Either you learn to respect me, or you don't have me at all. The words stunned the room. Bianca gasped, her mother's lips trembled. Her father's face flushed with anger, but none of it shook Kendall. For the first time in her life, she had drawn a line in the sand, a boundary that could not be crossed. And as her mother's trembling hands slowly fished the key from her purse and dropped it into Kendall's palm, the message was undeniable. The invisible daughter was invisible no longer. 1 year later, the scene could not have been more different. Kendall's apartment glowed with warmth. Twinkling lights draped across the ceiling, vibrant colors filling every corner. Friends laughed in the kitchen, music pulsed softly in the background, and the smell of homemade cake lingered in the air. At the center of it all stood Kendall Matthews, not hidden in the shadows, not clutching someone else's to-do list, but radiant, smiling, and unapologetically herself. Rachel clinked her glass and raised a toast to the year Kendall found her voice and to many more birthdays exactly like this one. Laughter and cheers filled the room. Glasses collided, and for the first time, Kendall didn't feel like a planner, a servant, or an afterthought. She felt like the star. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Shoulders straight, smile, genuine eyes alight with confidence. She was no longer the invisible daughter. She was a woman who had fought for her place in the world and won. This birthday wasn't about extravagance. It wasn't about outshining anyone. It was about presence. It was about finally being celebrated. And as she blew out the candles on her cake, surrounded by people who chose to love her for who she was, Kendall whispered to herself, "This is what it feels like to be seen." The Kendall of today looked nothing like the Kendall from a year ago. She was no longer the girl who shrank into the corner of every room, gripping a glass of water, as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. She no longer flinched at her phone buzzing, no longer silenced her voice to keep the peace. Now, when Kendall walked into a room, people noticed. Her posture was straight, her laughter unrestrained, her presence undeniable. At work, she spoke up during meetings, pitched ideas with confidence, and even negotiated a raise she once would have been too timid to ask for. Her co-workers didn't just see her as dependable anymore, they saw her as a leader. With her friends, she radiated a warmth that drew people in. She was no longer just a listener in the shadows, but a woman whose stories, whose joy, whose very presence filled the space. Even her family began to notice the difference. Her mother's calls came with a softer tone. Her father's demands had quieted. And Bianca, once the shining star, now reached out not as a queen expecting service, but as a sister trying to reconnect. Kendall had transformed, from invisible to undeniable, from forgotten to unforgettable. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was alive, fully, vibrantly, unapologetically alive. Kendall's living room had become more than just a space, it was a reflection of her journey. On one wall hung 3 framed photos from Florida, the glowing sunrise she watched with a mimosa in hand, the group selfie with Rachel, Michael, and Lisa laughing under the golden sky, and the snapshot of her swimming with dolphins, joy radiating from her face. To any visitor, they were vacation pictures. But to Kendall, they were something more, proof. Proof that she had once chosen herself and that choice had set her free. Her friends remained constants in her life. Rachel still her fiercest cheerleader. Michael, who always joked that he'd invested his airline miles in her happiness. Lisa, who never missed a chance to remind Kendall that she deserved every bit of joy she now carried. And then there was Aunt Susan, the quiet ally who had always believed in Kendall even when no one else did. On Kendall's bookshelf sat a silver picture frame Aunt Susan had gifted her, a faded photo of little 4-year-old Kendall blowing out candles on a small cake. Beneath it, a handwritten note, "You were always worth celebrating." Together, these pieces, the photos, the gifts, the people, became her symbols of freedom. They weren't just decorations. They were reminders that Kendall was no longer invisible. She was seen. She was valued. She was finally free. Kendall's journey was never just about birthdays. It was about something far greater, the courage to step out of the shadows and claim her own worth. For years, she had waited for love, for recognition, for a sign that she mattered. But the truth she discovered was simple and powerful: love begins with yourself. To be seen by others, you must first see yourself. To be valued by others, you must first value yourself. And sometimes the most powerful act of self-love is not a grand gesture, but a single word spoken with courage. Number: no to being used, no to being erased, no to living as invisible. Because every no to what diminishes you is in truth a louder yes to your worth. So Kendall's story leaves us with this: to be loved, you must first learn to love yourself. And sometimes saying no is the most powerful way of saying, "I deserve better." Kendall's story teaches us something timeless. Self-love isn't selfish, it's survival. Too often we give and give, hoping others will finally see us, only to realize we've made ourselves invisible in the process. But the moment you set boundaries, the moment you say no to being erased, you open the door to freedom. Because at the end of the day, you can't pour from an empty cup. To truly love others, you must first learn to love yourself. If Kendall's journey moved, you imagine how many more stories like hers can change the way you see yourself. Don't let this be the last time you feel inspired. Hit that subscribe button and join us here at Through Her Eyes, where every story reminds you of your own worth, your own voice, and your own power.